Some rap beefs explode like fireworks, loud, messy, and over by September. But then there are those that carry a different kind of heat. That slow, low burn that never quite goes out no matter how many years pass. And here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. What happens when one man's entire brand depends on chaos, and the other man's entire brand depends on never letting you see him sweat? Because that right there is the real foundation of one of the most misunderstood, but most layered conflicts in hip-hop history. We are talking about Curtis James Jackson III and Clifford Joseph Harris Jr., better known to the world as 50 Cent and T.I. And before you say you already know this story, hold on. Because the part most people miss is not what was said. It's the pattern underneath every single moment. And once you see that pattern, you genuinely cannot unsee it. One of these men built a legendary brand off intimidation, trolling, and treating the internet like his personal boxing ring. The other built his reputation off being strategic, composed, and publicly refusing to crash out, even when someone was standing right in front of him, begging him to. Over the years, their back and forth moved through different eras of hip-hop, from subliminal bars and mixtape chatter all the way to full-scale social media wars, Verzuz negotiation drama, and eventually into 2026, where the beef turned personal in the messiest, but most uncomfortable way possible. But through every single chapter, there is one thread that holds it all together. 50 throws rocks and hides his hands. T.I. tries to respond like a grown man, until one day, even he hits his breaking point. But before we get into all of that, if you're settling in for this one, do yourself a favor and head over to rgsnacks.com. That's our online concession stand stocked with Applewood smoked bacon jerky, freeze-dried goodies, and butter toffee peanuts. Trust us, you're going to want something to snack on for this one. Now, let's go back to where this actually started. The first real wave of tension dates all the way back to 2008. During a listening session in New York for G Unit's album Terminate on Sight, it was widely reported that 50 Cent took a shot at T.I. on a track called You So Tough. The lyrics went something like, and pay close attention here, nowadays this rap stuff ain't adding up. Now how do you get caught with 10 machine guns and only get 12 months? Now for context, T.I. had been arrested on federal weapons charges in 2007 and was reportedly facing up to 30 years behind bars. And then, he was sentenced to just 11 months. 50 didn't name anyone directly. Classic move. That plausible deniability was doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting. But the streets immediately connected every single dot. And that's where the speculation began circulating. The alleged, or widely disputed, and never proven in court suggestion that T.I. may have cooperated with federal authorities in some capacity in exchange for a lighter sentence. To be absolutely clear, that has never been established in any court proceeding. T.I. has denied it, but 50 was very deliberately playing into that public perception, and he knew precisely what he was doing. T.I. then addressed it, and the way he handled it told you everything about who he was going to be in this beef for the next 17 years.
When you challenged 50 to a Verzuz, some people were saying Tip tripping, and then when you said you had 5 classic albums, people said you were tripping. Did that response put a fire under you for this album? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That right there is example number 1 of the dynamic that would repeat itself over and over again. 50 does something provocative and completely deniable. T.I. responds with just enough restraint to leave space for the other person to walk it back, without the whole thing erupting. Tip's unspoken strategy was essentially, I heard you, but I'm not handing you the viral moment you came here for. And 50's strategy was the opposite. I want the viral moment, and if you won't give it to me willingly, I will keep applying pressure until you do. But then it got considerably worse. And the next chapter is where 50 revealed exactly how low he was willing to go. T.I. reported to prison in May 2009 and was released to a halfway house in December of that same year. He was fully released from federal custody in March 2010. But just months after walking free, in September 2010, T.I and his wife Tiny were arrested together in West Hollywood on possession charges. That arrest violated his probation terms, and suddenly he was staring down serious additional time. And before T.I had even been sentenced, 50 was already back in motion. According to reporting from Vibe magazine, when 50 made a series of deeply disrespectful public comments suggesting that Tiny should have taken T.I.'s charges and served the jail time for him. Sit with that for a second. This was not an attack on T.I. the rapper. This was a direct attack on T.I. the man, on how he leads his household, how he protects his family, and his role as a husband. That is a very specific and calculated kind of low blow, and T.I. responded, not with threats, but not with volume, but with a moral clarity that cut straight through.
You playing on my name when only one of us a rat in real life. You know I got your paperwork right, and my transcript is available online. Your excuses is useless. Get your ass in the box or STFU and live in fear.
He made it plain. Nobody, and he was very clear about this, nobody would be having a public discussion about what his wife should or could have done as it pertained to him or his legal situation. He went further, stating directly that it was coward behavior for a man to allow a woman to absorb a criminal charge on his behalf. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to go viral. When he was stating something he clearly believed as a fundamental truth about character. And that contrast, T.I.'s measured, principled response stacked against 50's scorched earth personal attack, drew a line between these two men that the culture never fully forgot. In the end, T.I. was sentenced to 11 additional months on the probation violation. The DA opted not to press charges related to the substance counts. Tiny's charges were dropped after she completed a substance program. And 50, yet he went to social media and posted that T.I. had been handed yet another get-out-of-jail-free card. Because of course he did. But here's the part that always gets glossed over in every recap of this beef. By November 2010, Vibe magazine reported that things had actually cooled between them. According to 50 himself, a mutual friend connected the two on the phone. And importantly, neither man had explicitly demanded the call. They reportedly talked through the tension like adults, and by January 2012, the temperature had settled enough that they collaborated on a remix together alongside Jeezy. That collaboration matters, because it confirms that at its core, the beef was never fully personal. Not yet. These two men could coexist. They could even create together. But that fragile peace was never going to hold permanently, because you cannot sustain peace with someone whose entire brand model depends on disruption. And that brings us to 2019, and a moment that, but while not directly about their beef, gave the clearest window yet into how fundamentally different these two men's values actually are. T.I. released a track called F Ninja, aimed at Floyd Mayweather Jr., specifically in response to Floyd's public support of Gucci during a highly publicized backlash campaign following a controversial sweater design. In the track, Tip questioned what celebrities genuinely do with their platforms and their wealth, whether they use their influence to build something meaningful or whether they spend it chasing jewelry and clout. A pointed and principled argument regardless of whether you agree with it. But, and this is the critical detail, guess who inserted himself without being asked? 50 Cent. He posted a mocking image targeting Floyd's literacy. This was not his conflict. Nobody called him in. But 50 operates on one fundamental principle. Attention is currency and chaos is the fastest way to collect it. If two people are already arguing and you throw a lit match into the room, everybody turns to look at you. That's the move. That has always been the move. And understanding that principle is what makes the next chapter of this story so much more revealing. In 2020, T.I. appeared on Hot 97 and reportedly stated that 50 was not an incredible lyricist, was even going as far as drawing a comparison to Nelly, and yes, that sent the internet directly into the sun. And then, right in the middle of quarantine, when the Verzuz battle format had become a genuine cultural lifeline giving fans something to rally around, T.I. publicly issued a challenge directly to 50 Cent. It was immediate, it was specific, and it forced everyone to choose a side before a single date had even been confirmed. Interview 50's response. He never formally agreed, yet instead of accepting the musical challenge, he steered the entire conversation into a public war of words, making comments about T.Y.'s beard allegedly not fully connecting, turning what should have been a celebration of hip-hop legacies into a pure dominance game. T.I. fired back, and yes, it got genuinely petty on both sides. Sales were being thrown around, insults were flying, and somewhere buried inside all of that noise was something much more telling. One of 50 had actually written about this exact strategy in his book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, where he explained that making enemies can be valuable for brand promotion, because if someone hates you, they talk about you, and that conversation spreads your name. Read that again slowly. 50 does not stumble into beef. He manufactures it, deliberately, methodically, because conflict is marketing. And T.I., a man who genuinely seems to treat open conflict as something beneath him unless a real principle demands his attention, keeps getting pulled back into someone else's promotional cycle. That is the messy part that nobody wants to say out loud. And then in November 2020, Chicago rapper King Vaughn and 2 other men lost their lives outside of an Atlanta venue. T.I. responded by posting a message on Instagram urging out-of-state rappers to keep their disputes away from Atlanta, framing the city as a place built on black excellence and progress. Some people felt the timing of that message was problematic, regardless of his intent, with people still actively grieving a very recent loss. A woman who publicly identified herself as King Vaughn's sister responded publicly and told T directly to mind his business. And then, right on schedule, 50 jumped in. He addressed T.Y. on Instagram, essentially telling him to back down because families were in pain. T.I. clarified that his original post was not specifically about King Vaughn, and stated that he had already expressed his condolences privately, where they were actually meant to go. But 50 was not interested in nuance. He was interested in the frame, making T.Y. appear cold and calculating during a moment of community grief. That pattern, using someone else's pain as ammunition in a personal conflict, is one of the most cynical moves in the entire playbook. And it would not be the last time 50 reached for it. Which brings us to January 2026. 50 posted a clip of T.I. performing stand-up comedy, reportedly bombing, with a caption mocking him for it. Unprovoked, unnecessary, and very much on brand. But then in February, T.I. publicly reignited his push for a Verzuz battle, and 50 responded by referring to T.Y. publicly as King Rat. Now, in the culture, that term carries an enormous amount of weight. And T.Y. came back with a comment that stopped the internet completely cold. He posted publicly claiming he had paperwork on 50, alleged paperwork, disputed, unverified, not established in any legal proceeding. But the implication alone, that documentation of some form of cooperation with authorities might exist for either of these men, turned what had been a long-running social media conflict into something that felt like an actual detonation. And that's where it gets messiest.
How y'all bitch-ass niggas raised? I'm not raised like that. I don't go. I'm not going back my mama. I'm not going. Nigga. So tell your dad, mama, dig her ass up and post a picture that look better than my mother.
During a 2026 interview on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast, T.I. disclosed something that had not been said on record before. He claimed that he and 50 had reached an agreement ahead of time. T.I. would publicly bring up the Verzuz idea first, and 50 would respond publicly to build anticipation and fan excitement ahead of the official announcement. According to T.Y., he followed through on his end exactly as planned. And then, allegedly, 50 flipped the script entirely, acting publicly confused, as if no such arrangement had ever existed. T.I.'s stated response was direct and final. He told the host that at that point he was questioning 50's character altogether, and that if 50's didn't want to do it, he simply should have said so. By that point, according to T.I., the matchup was permanently off the table. He said he no longer wanted to share a stage with 50 Cent. He said clearly that he did not respect him, not as a rapper, and not as a man. And then came the moment that crossed every line there was left to cross. 50 went after Tiny. He posted an unflattering image of her and included a caption that brought T.I.'s son King directly into it. And King responded in a way that the internet was completely unprepared for. Interview. Every single word of that response was earned. Because at some point, and this is something both these men would likely agree on if they were being honest, this stops being about rap. It stops being about Verzuz, about paperwork, about album sales or beard lines or subliminal bars on mixtapes. At some point, it becomes about what kind of man you actually are when you think the cameras are off. And 50 crossed a line in that moment that does not get uncrossed. Since then, T.I. has continued releasing material, yet using the tension as creative fuel and leaning into it musically. Meanwhile, 50 has largely remained on the other side of a keyboard, and whether that's strategy or something else entirely is a question worth sitting with. Because here is the thing that nobody is asking loudly enough right now. If T.I. allegedly has paperwork on 50, and allegations about T.Y.'s own cooperation have floated around in the culture for nearly 2 decades, and neither claim has been definitively proven or disproven in any court of law, then what exactly is this beef standing on at this point? Is this 2 men with a genuinely documented history of conflicting values who simply cannot stay out of each other's orbits? Or is at least one of them deploying the single most dangerous allegation in all of hip-hop culture as a weapon, knowing full well that in this culture the accusation itself does more damage than any diss track ever could? And what does it say about all of us that we keep hitting play every single time? Drop your answer in the comments, because I genuinely do not know how this story ends. And I think, if we're being completely honest, neither do they.